I'm Diane Wang. In 2025, I decided to make a weather blanket, as old ladies do. That means every day there is a stitch for every 10 minutes of daylight from sunrise to sunset, and the colors are determined by the temperature. At the end, there is a white stitch for every 10% of the moon phase. However, I decided I wanted to record more about what was really happening in 2025. So, for every death in Gaza, there is a black thread. If people froze to death, there's a white bead. If a hospital or medical facility was destroyed, there's a tan bead. There was a truce declared, and because of that, throughout some of February and March, there are very few threads. But unfortunately, on March, Israel broke the truce with carpet bombing, so that in this row, there are 4 threads per stitch. That's why the little red thread. In addition, I wanted to describe other things happening, such as the wildfires, Storm Ewan that hit the United Kingdom, the huge attack on immigration. Each of these orange beads with a black collar represents a death in ICE detention. There were other things happening. Soon after the inauguration, there was the end to aid to foreign countries. There was a horrible attack in the Democratic Republic of Congo. 3 children died in a van, frozen to death because their mother was homeless. There was a horrible torture and death of a young transsexual person, a young Chicana woman, 11 years old, a child, killed herself when she was bullied about her immigration status. The body of Emily Pike, a Native woman, was found later that month. About this time, Trump decided to send immigrants, hundreds of immigrants, to Panama, where they were detained. And there was an escalation of violence in Haiti. It wasn't all bad news, though. This little tassel represents, at last, the release of Leonard Peltier after many years. And throughout, occasionally, you will see little rhinestones that represent victories that happened in the lower courts. However, things did continue. Electricity was cut off to Gaza. They announced within a month after the attacks on immigrants that something like 1,000 had been arrested. There were attacks internationally on Sudan, on Yemen. There were more wildfires, dust storms, horrible tornadoes and dust storms in the Mideast. Every bead like this represents a flood internationally. Often these were described as the worst in a half century. The other smaller beads represent a flood here in the United States, often quite terrible. The Keystone Pipeline had its 28th leak in early April. There were more international attacks. a horrible measles outbreak in Texas that soon spread throughout the Southwest. A woman was deported and taken away from her 4 children. Suddenly, many people, especially those on campuses who had spoken out against Palestine, were taken by immigration. There were big No Kings national demonstrations, and internationally, the flotilla was sent. The Conscience was a yacht, a flotilla of aid that tried to get to Gaza. Unfortunately, it was bombed. As things continued, there were even more wildfires, floods. Here in Oakland, a teacher, Marvin Boomer, was killed when a police chase created an accident where he was killed. A congresswoman who tried to visit an ICE facility was arrested and put in handcuffs. And later, not too long later, Alex Padilla, the senator, was knocked to the ground, put in handcuffs, and taken out of a press conference by Kristi Noem. Israel did attacks on Iran. There was yet another, the Madeleine, tried to get to Gaza, another flotilla, but was captured and taken. As the late spring and summer began, we had more national demonstrations. In Los Angeles, there were huge demonstrations in support of immigrants, so Trump sent in the National Guard and militarized the city. There were several deaths, lynchings that usually are marked. Heat waves began to occur. As we get into the summer, there are horrific wildfires in Canada, in the Southwest, in France, in the Balkans. Global warming really showed what was going to happen in the future. There were several hurricanes and typhoons. There were heat waves. In one heat wave, several children died. Troops were sent to Washington, D.C. There were huge demonstrations in Indonesia. There was an international flotilla with about 40 ships, which set sail and later was attacked. As they approached the coast of Gaza, several countries sent ships in an effort, Spain, Turkey, sent ships to try to protect them. The flotillas happened because as aid was cut off to Gaza, people were beginning to starve to death. Every purple bead represents a death by starvation. Purple, I ran out of beads, I had to use blue. The translucent ones represent the deaths of children. Later, troops were sent to Chicago with ICE, and the United States began bombing fishing vessels from Venezuela. The first one, they killed 11 people, left several in the water for several hours before going back to kill them. In Nepal, Gen Z had a successful demonstration that made changes and replaced the government. somewhere here in June, there was the assassination of Melissa Hortman in Minnesota. But most of the time was taken with various violent deaths, the ongoing attacks against the Venezuelan vessels. Portland responded to Trump's assault on their city with the Portland Frog. There were more demonstrations. As people got into Gaza, they began finding bodies under the rubble from people who had been killed before. The attacks on Venezuela continued, as well as attacks on Yemen. In Nigeria, 600 children were kidnapped. As things developed, there were attacks on Lebanon, Cambodia, and escalation against the ships, the Venezuelan boats. The United States seized a tanker, and at the very end of the year, there was an attack on a Venezuelan dock, the first real attack on Venezuelan land, an assault on Iran, and a bombing raid against Nigeria on Christmas Eve. We ended the year with more attacks on Venezuelan ships and Israel's declaration that most, if not all, of the aid organizations would be denied entry into Israel. And that's 2025.